Welcome back to DMV Sports Zone.
Chased down by Beal in the corner for three, gets fouled and hits.
Welcome to DC.
Well, they tied him out.
You know we're down at the USA Cup. You're taking us lightly, I'm taking us lightly. Now you don't act on you, we'll be right back. Well, we gon' be right here, we gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break it down.
What's good, DMV Sports Zone? It's Noah. I know it's been a while. Been creating mainly Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts for the football previews. But now that the Ravens and the Washington football team are both off their consecutive buys, it's about time to create a full video, especially because we have extremely interesting Week 10 for both the Ravens and the Washington football team. Before I get started, as always, all my fantasy football analysis is coming from SportyEye. SportyEye is a mobile app that's integrated with artificial intelligence that democratizes the fantasy sports analytics process. It's really interesting to see all the new users that have been coming to the app in these past couple of weeks. If you want the access to the platform, link is in the bio. And without further ado, let's get started. So first things first, later tonight, the Ravens are taking on the Miami Dolphins in what is going to be a pivotal matchup, not only for the Ravens, but interestingly enough for the Dolphins. In terms of injuries, it's going to play a pretty big storyline for both teams. In terms of the Ravens defense, they have been shorthanded quite a bit at times this year, but this is the healthiest they've ever been. They have Calais Campbell coming back at full health, everybody ready to go against a Dolphins team that may not have Tua. He's a game-time decision. If that's the case, Jacoby Brissett struggled, frankly, last week. Only reason I think they won was because the Texans are terrible. So the Baltimore Ravens start out right off the bat. Ravens D, going to be a great starter if you don't have that Steelers with a Lions matchup or another top-ranked defense. The Ravens are projected to finish within the top 10. And especially this year, for some reason, defense, special teams have been very weak. You need key defensive performances to win in fantasy. So if you have the pleasure of having them off the waiver wire, or if you were listening to way back when in Week 5 and Week 6, when I said stash the Ravens Z, now is time to start them, especially if Tua's out. On the Ravens side of the ball, on the offensive side of things, obviously Lamar Jackson is a go-to guy. A lot of people were worried after the mediocre performance against the Bengals, bounced back, played really well last week. He's coming in against a Dolphins defense that hasn't been able to stop anyone. Really surprising. Last year they were a strong defense, but they did lose Kyle Van Noy, a lot of other key players. They've really struggled, particularly against the run. They're in the bottom 5 in the league in terms of multiple rushing analytics, including rushing touchdowns, rushing yards per game, yards per carry for running backs, and more importantly, fantasy points for running backs. They rank in the bottom 5 in the league. And also with Latavius Murray being not officially ruled out, but leaning towards out, you need to pick up Devonta Freeman. I know that Le'Veon Bell and Tyquan Williams offer goal line looks, steal touches, but Freeman is starting to run away with more and more of the carries, more importantly in the end zone. So keep a close eye. Latavius Murray is most likely going to be labeled out. If he is, Devonta Freeman is an excellent flex play. I know a lot of people project him as a high-end RB3. In my opinion, he's a low-end RB2, especially against a Dolphins team that struggles against the run. See them to really establish the run that clock, and play it safe. Because, the Ravens have been in way too many close games this season, especially against bad teams, frankly enough. So they're going to continue to lean on the run as they have all season and expect a good game from Devonta Freeman as well as Lamar Jackson. In terms of the receiving core, the passing defense does rank better for the Dolphins, but again, they're still bad. They're still ranking in the bottom 20 of the league in most passing fantasy relevant metrics, which includes yards per catch, touchdowns, fantasy points average for receivers. So that's going to be tricky because a lot of times when people play bad teams, everybody tends to think, oh, everybody's going to eat, everybody's going to feast. This is still the NFL. It's not often you're not going to see games where people are losing, 55-7. It's not Madden. So we need to determine who are the best receiver options for tonight. First off, the number one is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is currently the number 2 ranked tight end in fantasy right now in PPR leagues. And I think that trend continues tonight. He is Score Plus from Sporty Eyes backend. It projects him as a top 3 start in the position this week. And the analytics in the real world suggest that that will be the case. The Miami Dolphins are giving up some of the top 5 worst percentages in terms of fantasy points against tight ends. And they have also not faced a tight end of the quality of Mark Andrews. If the run game is going to get established, which it should and which it will, they're going to prefer the medium to short route with the occasional deep threat look. Xavier Howard is going to be on Brown. They're going to have their better DBs on Bateman now that he's in the lineup, which is benefiting Andrews tremendously because now he's a mismatch. They don't have a linebacker nor a safety that can match up well with Andrews. So expect a huge game from him tonight. He will be a top 3 finisher for Week 10. I mentioned already Marquise Brown and Bateman. Both of them are solid options, especially in PPR leagues, but I don't see the analytics favoring either of them. I think Brown has a safe floor, don't get me wrong, but if you're expecting a high ceiling that Brown is capable of in other games, don't expect that to happen. He's a solid 10 to 15 point fantasy points in PPR, 8 to 14 and half PPR. So he has a very safe floor. So that means it's an excellent flex. If you're in a deeper league, probably a wide receiver 2. Bateman is a risky domino play. He has so far shown that he is the future wide receiver 1 of the Ravens. He's only a rookie, but he doesn't really show anything that indicates that he can take away Brown's targets or Andrews' targets for that matter. So he's a solid wide receiver 4. If you're really desperate, you could risk him at a flex position, but he's best as a stash and wait to see for now. But we'll see what happens in the playoff push for the rest of the season. So all in all, this is the Ravens' game to lose. There's no reason they should not be putting the beat down on the Dolphins. Lamar Jackson, Justin Tucker, Ravens defense, Mark Andrews, all must starts. Brown with a safe floor as a flex in a deeper league. Bateman, riskier play as a flex in a deep league. Overall, great outlook for the Ravens tonight. In terms of the Washington football team, it's going to be a matchup that made Heineke famous. They're going to be facing off against the Buccaneers. And the outlook isn't looking as pretty as it did in the playoffs. Frankly, there was a lot of confusion because there was a lot of speculation that Fitzpatrick was going to return to the starting lineup. But at this case, there's no timetable for him to return, so it looks like Taylor Heineke will be the starter for at least another week. He has the threat in fantasy, and that's the thing. In real life, he's been mediocre. He's thrown over 7 to 9 interceptions, which is frankly terrible. But he makes up for it with a lot of rushing yards on the ground, which makes up for his fantasy value. In terms of how can he stack up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that is looking just as good as last year, that would make him a QB2 in a Superflex league. If you have 2 QB leagues, you could start him at a QB2 at a high risk, but he does have a safer floor because of the rushing ability, but don't expect anything crazy from him. He projects in the bottom half of fantasy QBs this week. Even with a couple good players on buys, that should tell you something. Score Plus doesn't trend that great, but if you do want the punt play for your Superflex league, you could start him. But I would, in general, not recommend it for any standard league. Also, very interestingly enough, Antonio Gibson, despite having the bye week, is still having problems with his shin. He does have a slight shin fracture that he's been playing through the entire season, but there's no update that he's really improving his status. So even though he's a safe play, His ceiling is getting lower and lower, which is really troubling. But I know there's a couple of key players that might be out. Nick Chubb, the Dalvin Cook situation. So suddenly the running back position is getting pretty thin, especially with Derrick Henry out as well. So Gibson is still ranked within the top 15 of the position, according to Score Plus. He will be a minimum flex RB2/RB3 in PPR leagues, and in half PPR leagues, an RB3 or flex. He still offers a lot of potential in terms of they do want to commit to him more in the passing game, but words are just words. We haven't seen that happen yet. I know he's been hurt, and he probably is in better health now, but it's not a good chance to risk with the Buccaneers. So don't expect nothing crazy from him, but he's still a start in a deeper league. In terms of any of the other fantasy relevant players, I'm sorry, Washington football team defense is an absolute avoid at this point in time. I know that Godwin is questionable. I know that Antonio Brown is probably going to be out for the game. But the Buccaneers still have been able to score at a decent pace, still ranking within the top half of the league in all offensive metrics. And the Washington football team defense has been, they played better, but they're not enough to really justify playing against a good Buccaneers team. So they're in a void. And unfortunately, Logan Thomas' situation is still pretty murky. He is off of IR, but even if he plays, it remains to be seen what they're going to do, especially because Seals Jones played well. Will they play more in 2 tight end sets? What are they going to do? A lot of question marks in the air. And now with Logan Thomas returning, both Thomas and Seals Jones' value has decreased, even in a weak tight end position. There's way too many question marks. They will be tight end 2s, which is frankly not a great start. Hopefully you have another better tight end, because I do not recommend either of them for Sunday. But if you have to pick between the two, obviously Logan Thomas. But again, extremely risky play against the Buccaneers. Besides that, McLaurin is McLaurin. He's a start, even if he doesn't have the highest ceiling as he once had, especially if Heineke cannot continue to improve his play. So unlike the Ravens, the Washington football team outlook is a lot bleaker. Not many players worth starting, especially their defense, which is crazy to say because that was one of the things that I said would have a lot of potential coming into the season. They've just been, the most disappointing defensive fantasy. I know now that at this point they're barely owned in 35% of Yahoo leagues, so that's just show you how much of a disappointment they've been after being the average ADP of the third defense taken off the board. So all in all, same storylines, but different details. Ravens looking good, but this time the running back situation has improved. Now you got Freeman in there. You could throw him into value. And the defense is improving on the Washington football team side. Gibson is holding on to fantasy relevance for dear life. Same McLaurin, a must start with a lower ceiling. Heineke in the same boat as Gibson. And let's not even talk about the defense. In terms of the kicking situation, Hopkins moved on. We have our new kicker with Blewett. But what can I say? We're in the bottom half of the league in terms of scoring. We don't offer many opportunities for kickers. A lot of better options, including Chris Boswell from the Steelers. As they're facing up the Lions, I know he's available in a lot of leagues. There are way too many kickers available for you to be picking any of the Washington football team kickers, and including Justin Tucker. Tucker is a draftable kicker. He's probably been drafted. He's starting in every league you're in. So, yeah, tale of two cities. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to improve for the Washington football team, but the Ravens have a must win, in my opinion, tonight. There's no reason they should absolutely blow out the Dolphins, and the analytics suggest they will. So again, this is Noah. I'm glad to be doing a full video recap for fantasy football for Week 10, and I'm very excited to see what happens tonight. Let's go Ravens, and grab your popcorn. It's going to be a good one, and have the great rest of your day. Thank you.